I'm Maddie. I'm a Limitless employee. I'm a PT here. So about 2 weeks ago, I was actually at work. I was playing around with one of our little kiddos, and I was holding on to someone, and they were kind of swinging, and during a swing, I had a tibial subluxation, which is a really fancy way of saying I had a partial dislocation of my knee. And so during that subluxation, when my bone kind of came back in, I definitely tore my meniscus. My perspective of rehab, in terms of how I treat it, isn't totally different, but now I can confidently say I've done the rehab myself. And so I'm in your shoes when it comes to like the mental aspect of it. I'm given the opportunity to practice what I preach and to show what PT 2.0 can look like in terms of those first 48 hours after an injury versus what the normal expectations are after an injury. If someone has an injury that what happened to me, right? So a potential meniscus injury or ligament injury, most humans immediately think, okay, I'm gonna go get an image, which might be an X-ray, an MRI. I'm gonna go see an ortho, and then maybe after that, they're gonna either say, okay, PT or surgery. So usually that first week or two looks a lot like people are very scared to move, obviously in a lot of pain, but they don't really know what to do about it. So it's a lot of Advil, Tylenol, it's a lot of elevating the leg, avoiding any exercise at all costs, probably a lot of lounging, and then just getting sad and scared about what's gonna happen because you're just waiting on an image or waiting for your next consult. So what I tell every person to do if they were in my position, which I know it's hard to do because it goes against the normal expectations. Thankfully, with my knowledge, I know what happened in the moment. I know what my knee did, and I know what my response was gonna be. So those first 48 hours were focused on as much blood flow as I could get into my knee joint itself, and move as much as I can, which is more of optimization of movement versus avoidance, which was the biggest thing for my recovery by a mile. A lot of people, they think like, okay, rest, ice, elevate. I kind of did the opposite. I only had about like 30 degrees of motion in my knee that were pain-free. I couldn't fully bend it and I couldn't fully straighten it, but throughout the entire day, I was moving in that 30 degrees as much as I could because I wanted to get as much blood flow into that spot so I could bring nourishment and healing chemicals into the area so I could start that process immediately versus waiting a week to do it. As I was doing that, I was able to start getting more motion. Pain was going down. I was getting a little excited, obviously, because everything that we've been preaching is working, and like I knew it was going to. Throughout the first 48 hours, it was kind of cool. Pain was still very high, but I was able to see just the progress and tolerance to movement. I was in crutches for those first 48 hours. I couldn't yet put any weight through it. On Friday, so 2 days, or like 48 hours after I hurt my knee, Tommy, which is another PT here, he was doing a lot of hands-on treatment to me. And after that, I was finally able to get my heel on the ground, which meant I could start a little bit of weight bearing. And once I was able to start walking, everything was exponential from there in terms of progress.